uh, and welcome to this online speak out in solidarity with the women of Afghanistan. My name's Susan Price, and I am a co-editor of Green Left and a member also of Socialist Alliance. Before we begin today, we want to acknowledge that we're meeting on stolen land, gathered on stolen land, wherever we are across Australia. I am speaking to you from the land of the Barramatagal people of the Darug Nation in Sydney's west, and I want to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging, and respect to any First Nations people joining us this afternoon. In a moment, we're going to hear from some activists in support of the struggle of Afghan women for their rights. This speak out is part of a global day of action that's been called by the Revolutionary Association of the Women of Afghanistan, or RAWA, as you may know it, also along with 1 Billion Rising and V-Day, two women's organisations campaigning against violence against women. And before we end our speak out today, we're also going to take a series of screenshots of the people who are gathered here today to share on social media with the hashtag of Stand With the Women of Afghanistan. And we hope that you can stay with us until about 3:45 and participate in that photo shoot as part of the International Day of Action. Well, on August 16, following the withdrawal of United States troops from Afghanistan, the Taliban entered Kabul and over the following days took control of the city and the country. And we all witnessed very distressing scenes as people desperately tried to flee the country, but we also witnessed some very heroic scenes of women, young women in particular, organising protests and standing up against the Taliban's brutality. And we want to acknowledge that the situation that's unfolding today in Afghanistan is the product of 2 decades of US, NATO and other foreign intervention. On October 7, 2001, under the banner of the War on Terror, the US NATO-led coalition bombed Afghanistan, then occupied the country, claiming to be bringing with it democracy and women's rights. The terrorists the US claimed to be fighting were in fact a product of their own meddling in Afghanistan and the Middle East for decades. Earlier during the Cold War, in particular in Afghanistan, and the puppet governments that were installed in Afghanistan following the intervention were filled with warlords, fundamentalists, and many corrupt forces. As Afghani activist Malalai Joya says, the Americans replaced the barbaric regime of the Taliban with brutal warlords and then began to negotiate with the Taliban, even though the nature of the Taliban has never changed. And she continues, was this 20-year mission in vain? For me, yes. The American and Western troops have failed. They came because of their own geopolitical interests and left because of their own domestic interests. What will happen after the withdrawal of troops, asks Malalai. Well, everyone, she says, fears for their own future. In the short term, the situation will not improve. That is clear. In the long term, however, it is in the interests of Afghans that Western troops leave. No democracy arises from a military occupation. Well, the Australian government was actively involved in the invasion and occupation. Prime Minister John Howard, who then led the government, along with George W. Bush in the United States and Tony Blair in Britain, should really be facing war crimes tribunals for their role in the intervention in Afghanistan. And to add to the suffering of the Afghan people, the Australian government has turned away refugees, many of whom are from the oppressed Hazara community and those who are LGBTI identifying. They've locked up refugees from Afghanistan in onshore and offshore detention and denied them permanent protection. Well, our first two speakers today are coming to us via pre-recorded video messages from Kabul. Sudaba Kabiri and Razia Barakzai were two of the women who organised the first protest against the Taliban after Kabul fell in August. Their brave action has inspired many other women around the country and their supporters to organise protests against the Taliban's ban on women working, having access to education and to any public life whatsoever. So if you'll just bear with me, I'm going to share my screen and cross over to the first of these messages from Razia in Kabul.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم. افغانستان در حال گذار از حساس ترین مرحله تاریخ معاصر است. آنچه در این برهه زمانی بحث برانگیز و قابل تشویش از پایمال شدن حقوق اساسی خانم هاست. فعلا زنان سلحشور افغانستان بدون پشتوانه و با دستان خالی در حال مقابله و نبرد با گلوله طالب است. پیروزی زن افغان بدون شک به معنی پیروزی زنان جهان است. پس من از تمام زنان خواهشمندم در هر کجای دنیا که هستند همصدا و همنوای زنان افغانستان باشند. جایی دارد تشکری کنم از خانم هایی که تا فعلا در تمام دنیا با زنان افغانستان همصدا بوده و حمایتشان کردند.
That was Razia, and now I'm going to show you another video, which is the message from Sudaba Kabiri. If you would like to hear more from Sudaba, there's a terrific interview with her that has been published on Green Left that I'd encourage you to have a look at. So just bear with me and I'll bring the next video up.
Suze, we can't see and we can't hear you.
Sorry, Rach. Thank you, Rach. I've just been informed that the video and the sound weren't coming through. I'll just try and share that again. Sorry about that.
Thank you for being voice of Afghan women. Political change in Afghanistan, perhaps it is the biggest geopolitical change in our region in last decades. Recently suffering terrible time and have hard time fighting for women's rights in Afghanistan, stand against oppression and raise our voice with an extremist group under their government by the name of Taliban, that they are not believing on women's rights, human rights, civilization and equality, trying to have restriction and limitation for female. The victory of Afghan women is the victory of women around the world. As an Afghan representative woman, warmly I am appreciating and thanksgiving from women around the world that they stand with us, they support us, especially from women of Australia. Many thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I hope that all came through loud and clear. All right. Yes, so as I said, please visit the Green Left website if you'd like to hear that interview with Sudaba Kabiri from Kabul. Okay, so moving on, thousands of Afghan refugees, as I mentioned, have sought asylum following the invasion and occupation of Afghanistan. And many thousands are waiting in refugee camps in Indonesia and other staging countries. And those who have been living in Australia are still living in fear of being sent back to Afghanistan. Today, we're also going to hear about some initiatives around the plight of refugees. And I'd like to welcome Sajida Samar, an Afghan Australian who is the coordinator of the newly formed Diaspora Advocacy Network for Afghanistan. Welcome, Sajida.
Thank you very much, Susan, for giving me an opportunity to speak in this important event today. As mentioned, my name is Sajida Sama, originally from Afghanistan, and a member of Diaspora Advocacy Network for Afghanistan. It is a newly formed network, as Susan mentioned, and we are tirelessly working to raise voices of women from Afghanistan and the general concerning security situation and human rights violations that are taking place in Afghanistan. My apologies before acknowledging the traditional custodians of land, I started my talk, but I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land from where I'm speaking today, the Turrbal and Yagra land, and pay respects to all elders, past, present, and emerging. And I acknowledge everyone attending this important event today. Again, thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. So with respect to women's rights or women's situation in Afghanistan, it is not only concerning but heartbreaking, because since Taliban have taken over Afghanistan on 15th of August, the situation has started becoming worse and worse for everyone, but particularly for Afghan women. We have all been seeing that Taliban have been declaring and announcing that they have changed. They are not the previous Taliban who ruled Afghanistan between 1996 from 1996 to 2001. But today is the witness that they are the same Taliban. Their claims are different and contradictory to their actions. Since they have taken over, Afghan women are only restricted to their homes. They are hiding their identity. Afghanistan has become a country who does not seek the pride in its achievements anymore, because everyone has to hide their achievement instead. Otherwise, they can be highly at risk, can be persecuted by Taliban. And particularly for women, it is even more severe, because under Taliban regime or through the ideology of Taliban, women are not allowed to work. Women should not be exposed in the society. They should not be seen. Otherwise, according to their version of Sharia law, it is a sin. So women and everyone in Afghanistan knows what ideology they have and how they see Afghani society. And since they have taken over, everyone is fearful of their lives. Nobody is feeling protected, particularly women. No one is feeling safe, mainly women. Women have been hiding their clothes. Women have been hiding their documents, burning them in most cases, and they are not coming out to be identified as one of the active or progressive women that they used to be in the last 20 years that Afghanistan was trying to function as a democratic country. Afghanistan also was really, I would like to mention that it already was a very, very hard place to live in, particularly for women. It was one of the top in violence against women, but still our brave women tried to survive in that system. They made a lot of progress. They worked tirelessly and worked really hard, got education, got into almost all areas of life, from politics to social, to economic, to arts, to media. Everywhere we saw women presence. And it was not that because Afghanistan was having a good time at that time and Afghanistan was free. For women, Afghanistan has always been a hard place. Now it is even harder. Let's mention it that way. There were already a lot of cultural barriers, a lot of traditional restrictions, a lot of taboos that our women were dealing with, but they were okay as long as they could fight those, for them, that might be little barriers, and go through that and finally work it towards achieving their goals. But what happened now, you know, it's just so hard for our women, because it is not easy to fight against a regime, to fight against an extremist organization, to fight against an organization that is one of the most dangerous ones in the world. That is the government of Afghanistan today. The government of Afghanistan today, or so-called government of Afghanistan today, does not believe in women participation. They do not believe that women are equal as men. They do not believe them as same human to men. Basically, they do not believe in women participation or anything like that. They believe that according to Sharia, women's duties are described only inside house. Their children serve their husbands and cover themselves, and not to be seen to be a source of shame or becoming a reason for shame for the family or society. Women, through the eyes of Taliban, is only a sexual element that can pose threat, or that can be a source of provoking men's sexual desire, if I say it in simple words. That's how women are seen in Afghanistan, through the eyes of Taliban, and through their ideology. Based on their ideology, they are trying to restrict women through any way possible. And we are seeing what is happening today. I am in contact with girls in Kabul. They're struggling. They're all kind of in hiding. They used to be active in some demonstrations and protests and raising their voice, but they were beaten up. They were shot at in some cases, and they were sent back home. And then later on, Taliban declared that to keep public order, no one is allowed to do any demonstrations anymore. They need to seek permission from the government or from Taliban before doing any sort of assembly. So these girls tried to go through that process, but then that process failed again, because they are not, of course, giving any permission for women to come out and raise their voice, but they are just telling them to wait, and keep waiting. As we know now, the primary school for boys have opened, but there is no news on girls' school at all. At the moment, this shows that there is a lot of resistance in terms of women's rights from Taliban. For now, what they have allowed is only for women to come and work in health sector and education sector. But in those two sectors as well, women are so scared of their lives. They do not feel safe. They do not want to be identified as the previous employees of those two ministries or sectors. They're not ready to come out and expose their identity to Taliban, because they do not believe them. They believe that they are the same Taliban who used to cut women body parts if they were caught or suspected for any sexual behavior, or if they were suspected for having relationship outside marriage or adultery or things like that. The women know that who Taliban are and who they are dealing with. However, after the fall of Taliban, after the last regime, our women fought all those taboos. They came out, they became judges, they started working in defense force, they had a high presence in Afghan police force. We had a group of women who started playing music. We had athletes, we had a woman pilot. You must have heard of women robotic team. You must have heard of women who were supposed to come to Australia to play in Hobart Test towards the end of November, but intercepted and not allowed by Taliban. And the reason given was that sports exposes women's body, which is a sin in Islam or in Sharia. So this is the reason, that is the basis of all sorts of restrictions that our women are facing back in Afghanistan. In the time of 20 years, whatever our women have achieved, whatever struggles our women went through, whatever fights our women fought in order to break those barriers are all gone. It's all buried. They are trying to intentionally, for the safety of their own life, trying to hide it. They are trying to get rid of their identity. So many people, including women, so many women have been displaced in the neighboring country of Pakistan, and they have nothing to do, nowhere to go. They're not sure of their future anymore. They're uncertain of the next day. I'm in contact with girls who used to be journalists in Kabul, in contact with girls who used to be athletes in Kabul, but they're all gone. We had women cyclist team in the most remote part of Afghanistan, such as Bamiyan. They used to ride. They used to ride their bikes from Bamiyan to Kabul for fundraising, for promoting women's sports and things like that. It's all gone, and it is terribly heartbreaking to see all this gone. Just in a matter of few weeks, the whole country collapsed. We were betrayed. Women were betrayed by international community, by our own president, and all the achievements, hopes of development and progression, particularly for women, is all gone. And seeing those women today sitting at home, sitting quiet, trying to hide, trying to seek permission to let's say have a press conference to raise their voice, to raise their concern in the current system, whatever is happening, and they cannot do that because Taliban have said they cannot do any sort of assembly without the permission. They have to go through a process, but the process is that they need to go to, let's say, Ministry of Justice in order to seek permission. When they go, they end up at the door and they need to be checked. And then Taliban send them away saying that, oh, unfortunately, we don't have any women guards to check you. So you are security-wise, you are not allowed to go inside. So these are the sort of barriers that Taliban are making in order to push women back. And even in some cases that they were successful to get permission from the local police station, for example, for a peaceful assembly. Still, when they came out, they started their demonstration. Another group of Taliban who called themselves the police, they started coming and whipping them, beating them up and sending them home again. So Taliban, when they came first, they claimed that they have changed. Women are allowed to work. Women are allowed to take part in the social life as before. But they did not honor those promises. They did not honor women's rights. They did not honor their own reputation of government. It's just the situation is just highly seriously for our women, and they are requesting international community, Australian government, women outside Afghanistan to help them raise their voice and their concerns, because they're thinking that they're not getting that opportunity inside Afghanistan. Thank you for having me today, and if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Sajida. Really appreciate your words. And it's good to get insight, particularly because you're in contact with people who are still on the ground in Kabul. I think that's really critical. Now I'd just like to introduce our next speaker and to say that solidarity with Afghan women has also come from their sisters in the Kurdish community around the globe. The Women's Protection Units, or YPJ, that you may have heard of, who've been fighting ISIS or Daesh in northern Syria and parts of Iraq, have recently sent a message of solidarity to Afghan women. And the message said, just as the YPJ have resisted the IS and the Turkish occupiers and their gangs, Afghan women too can become a force for freedom with their struggle and organisation. And I'd now like to introduce to you Gule Rose. Gule is representing the Kurdish women's movement, and Gule is the co-chair of the New South Wales Democratic Kurdish Community Centre. So welcome, Gule.
Thank you, Susan. Hello, everyone. Before I begin to read out my statement, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodian on the land I'm on today. And I would also like to pay my respect to elders past and present. And I salute the struggle of Afghan sisters. Kurdish women movement stands in solidarity with Afghan women. As the Kurdish women's movement, we will remain in solidarity with our Afghan sisters under all circumstances. No woman is alone, and will be the voice of every woman. The Taliban's rapid progress is a new phase of the project and redesign the Middle East. The people of the Middle East have been sacrificed to the attacks of the colonial powers and the dirty relations of the reactionary forces in the region for centuries. The only solution offered by these powers to the peoples of the Middle East, who are in a constant state of a chaos and crisis, has been to deepen the deadlock. Democracy, freedom of women, destruction of nature and history mean nothing to these powers and stand just as a demagogic disclosure in the places in question. To believe that all these common values of humanity could be imported from abroad has resulted in a disappointment each time. States such as the US, Germany, and France, as well as Turkey, which is the biggest war organization in the world, and the paramilitary forces affiliated to these have brought only blood, tears, death, and massacre to the people of the Middle East. Defining the latest situation in Afghanistan as the clearest example of this truth, the Taliban's rapid progress in a very short time is not a spontaneous development, but is a new phase of the project to design the Middle East. Everything clearly shows that the theater has been staged. The administration of a country has been openly transferred to a terrorist organization. The simplest and most realistic expression came from Afghan women when they called out to the hegemonic world powers and said, "We are disgusted by hypocritical so-called emancipators." Afghan women did not deserve this. Democracy and freedoms can only be enjoyed, and a humane life can only be spoken about in a system that peoples and women built with their own power and will. No other force, policy, external imposition, or expectation will bring a democratic, free, and equal life for peoples. As Kurdish women, we know that self-organization and self-defense are more valuable than bread and water for women. For years, we have been struggling against all the genocidal attacks of the Turkish state and ISIS. We now have a say in our lives based on our own strength, and we have started to build a free and equal life on our own lands. This struggle continues growing stronger. We know very well that AKP, ISIS, and Taliban are misogynistic gang organization. It is a known fact that dictator Erdogan has relations with the Taliban as well as with ISIS. We will be fighting against this misogynistic mentality everywhere and all the times. We will be in solidarity under all circumstances. Afghan women have been fighting for many years to live in an equal, free, and democratic country against all kinds of reactionary forces. And thus they have developed a culture of resistance. They have fought against execution, stoning, rape, and many other brutal practices and attacks. They paid prices for their cause. It is now necessary for further increase the solidarity and common struggle with Afghan women. Therefore, as the Kurdish women's movement, we will be in solidarity with our Afghan sisters under all circumstances. No woman is alone, and we will be voice of every woman. And I like to end my statement with one of the quote that Kurdish leader Abdullah Öcalan, he says, "A society cannot be free without a women liberation." In solidarity. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gule. Now our next speaker, well, many of us took inspiration from the Sudanese Revolution in 2018, 2019, that overthrew the brutal 30-year-long dictatorship of Omar al-Bashir. And women played a key role in the mass movement and in the solidarity efforts around the world with the people of Sudan. So we'd like to now welcome to speak Maysoon El-Najumi. Maysoon is a member of Sydney Sudanese community. She's an activist and blogger. Welcome, Maysoon.
Thank you, Susan, and everybody here. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which I'm speaking from today and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. And I acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded, and this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I support the Uluru Statement from the heart, and I believe that a treaty representing the aspirations of First Nation people enshrined in the Constitution is the way forward. My name is Maysoon. I'm a member of the Sudanese community in Sydney. I just want to start by saying that when Kabul fell to the Taliban, the commentary on the Sudanese street was this: "He who seeks to cover himself with America is naked." Because we know that democracy, freedoms, and sound economic policies are not aid packages that are given by the international community, they are taken by the people. But we know that all this is just box ticking, a way for the international community to continue business as usual, where they can say, look, there is an improvement in women's rights, put a tick here. There's an improvement of religious freedoms and the rights of minorities, tick. Why? To save face, so they may continue to either expand a geopolitical presence or exploit the natural resources of a country, or sign multi-billion arms deals, extort corrupt governments to take huge loans and drown in debt, or to break a country open to liberalize its economy and become another market for Western products. All this happens with the collaboration of a select privileged, mostly male elite ruling class. They may be wearing turbans and have long beards and swing rifles from their arm and recite the Quran, but they speak the same language of shaved, young, white, male-suited CEOs of giant surveillance tech companies or soft-spoken, fluent, Harvard-schooled, UN-employed heads of states. The post-revolution government in Sudan also, unfortunately, continued with business as usual, with the same economic policies as the previous religious military dictatorship, with IMF experts continuing to advise with the same structural adjustment programs. And yet Biden, with the same audacity on which he congratulated himself on a job well done in Afghanistan, delivered a speech yesterday on Sudanese women marching in the streets, another box ticked for the feminist US state policies. Never mind if the economic measures are impoverishing women and preventing them from accessing education and basic health service. That is why I thank the Socialist Alliance for providing platforms like this, through which I got to read about RAWA, as I have read about the Kurdish movement in Rojava. I salute their struggles and the struggles of the people of Afghanistan, because solidarity is not about just getting great numbers of people to gather around the cause, but through solidarities with other sister movements, you get the opportunity to redefine yourself and your movement over and over again. When you align your cause with land right movements, feminist movements, social justice movements, climate action movements, we continue to clarify to each other who we are and what we are standing for and who we are standing against. We get to see the big picture, where the biggest polluters, extractionists, land grabbers, stock market billionaires, the military industry, religious extremists, the police, Silicon Valley, the patriarchy are all unified in their joint interests and agenda. Every day this becomes clearer that the enemy of the people may wear many masks, but they have one face. So it becomes easier for us in different movements to quickly join the dots. An attack on a union leader in Port Sudan is not just a dispute between employers and workers. You quickly see that this the bigger picture of the privatization of public institutions, the liberalization of the economy, structural adjustment programs, and the support of a military-civilian partnership. I also believe that the solidarity of brown movements together is, brown and black movements together is important, because we also need to bring our ideas and agendas to the table of solidarity. If everybody remembers, during the revolution, the poster of the lady in the white robe chanting and among the people inspired many people, but without breaking down the elements of privilege, class, and race that was in that picture. So it's important for us to redefine who our icons are. When I hear the name of the Ministry of Propagation of Virtue and Prevention of Vice in Afghanistan, I know exactly what that word means, because I've lived under it in Sudan. It's not just a way to gag women. It's a very intelligent system of control and surveillance, pretty much like the tech surveillance systems we have here. It is a way to shut down dissent, and it should be addressed as so. Women movements are scary, not because of traditional old ways of thinking, but because the spaces in which arm deals, structural adjustment programs, stock markets, police thrive, and where the police thrive are predominantly male. Women movements are dangerous because of their domino effect and how they bring down all systems of privilege. We also need to stop moving quickly from one cause to another, like from Sudan to Hong Kong to Thailand to Myanmar, Palestine, and now Afghanistan. We need to invest long-term in all the causes, in all our sister causes, because let me tell you, right now in Sudan, USAID, the Carter Center, other state-sponsored INGOs are well invested long-term in our countries, and so should solidarity movements in the West. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maysoon. Well, certainly the future of Afghanistan is going to be in the hands of its young people. The average Afghan person is 18 years of age, and 2/3 of the country is under 25 years of age. After the Taliban announced that only boys and male teachers would resume their studies and work, there was a huge viral trend on social media where kids were posting pictures, holding placards with slogans against the unofficial ban on women and girls' education, with the hashtag "Not Without My Sister." And Yasmin Afghan, who has been filing reports from Kabul as part of the Kabul Diaries series that we've been publishing in Green Left, she's written, "Women, especially the new generation of young Afghans, will not bow to the Taliban's brutalities and will fight for their rights." And on that note, we're now going to hear from Zeynep Korkmaz, who's a young activist from the Australian Kurdish Women's Association. Welcome, Zeynep. Could someone unmute Zeynep? Yep.
Thank you, Susan. I would just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I stand and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. As we know by now, the recent transition of power from the former Afghan government has created widespread anxiety throughout Afghanistan. 40 years of conflict, persistent poverty, and natural disasters caused by climate change, and now COVID-19 are a lethal combination for Afghans. After decades of fragility and anguish, gender equality must be resurrected through increasing women empowerment in Afghanistan. Women's empowerment is a multifaceted social component that strives to cover the complete narrative that is required for any nation's progress. Since the fall of the Taliban regime in 2001, efforts have been made in Afghanistan to secure women's rights. However, today, yet again, those efforts are being compromised in the most horrific of ways. As Kurdish people and women, we know very well that the only way to defend our existence and will against the imperialist and colonial policies of the global hegemonic powers is through organization. Without self-power, self-organization, and self-defense, it will not be possible to build and maintain a free life. Both as people and as a movement, we have experienced and still experience this reality very heavily. In the same way, the handing over control over Afghanistan to the Taliban, the enemy of women and peoples, happened in the context of the geostrategic interests pursued by the Western states, especially the USA, in the Middle East and Central Asia. Once again, we see that for the powers in question, the wishes, the will, the dreams, hopes, and efforts of the people living in these lands do not matter at all. And I am afraid, my friends, that the ugly chapters of genocides and deep-rooted history of persecution in the Middle East will last longer if we ignore the facts. And the price we may pay for neglecting our duty to act may prove to be too high. So let us stand against the killing of innocent civilians. Together, we bring peace and unity to our communities. And to replace the old paradigm of war with new paradigm of waging peace, we must be pioneers who can push the boundaries of human understanding. We must be doctors who can cure the virus of violence, and we must be soldiers of peace who can do more than just preach to the choir. So we call upon all women to stand in solidarity with our sisters in Afghanistan, to raise their voices and to defend their lives, achievements, and dreams. Let's enhance our women's alliances against these patriarchal and misogynistic powers. Jin Jian Azadi. Thank you.
Thanks, Zainab. Jinjian Azadi.
Which means woman, life, freedom. So thank you.
Very appropriate. Okay, and thank you so much for those words. Now we're going to hear from Vivian Porscholt. Viv is speaking from Jews Against the Occupation. Vivian is a long-term activist who also participated in the Freedom Flotilla to Gaza back in 2011, and we're very, very grateful to have Vivian here with us this afternoon. So please go ahead, Vivian.
Yes, thank you, Susan. I acknowledge that I stand here on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. This land was stolen, it was never ceded. This great wrong can only be healed by a just treaty. And may I first say that identifying Jewish interests as part of the problem in this whole imperial mess is not acceptable and not helpful in defining who the enemy is. We must not fall into this shit again. Now, I bring greetings from Jews Against the Occupation Sydney to the brave people of Afghanistan who have survived and suffered so much from outside invasions, yet continue to resist. Anti-Semites have often abused us Jews as ruthless cosmopolitans, but we take pride in taking on the mantle of citizens of the world. All struggles for freedom strike a chord in our hearts. So we offer solidarity to the people of Afghanistan in their current crisis. It is indeed the greatest honor to be speaking here alongside such a great panel of activists. In particular, we greet Sudaba Kabiri, who with 3 other young women stood before the presidential palace to defy the new occupant. Alone, you 4 confronted the Taliban. You defied many, including your old families. We are in awe of your courage. Your action has inspired so many across Afghanistan. Following your brave example, demonstrations have been held across many towns. The Taliban have shot a number, it's not even certain how many. This is stunning bravery, such amazing women. Then you held a press conference in secret to launch the Afghan women's fighting movement. What an important development. And all power, we wish you all power to your arms. You say you are bound to take this action because this is such a critical time. You say that you cannot be silent, so neither must we across the world remain silent. We must oppose these forces outside that would make Afghanistan their battlefield, either with force of arms or force of money power. We must stand with you. We must oppose the forces within that who would repress and oppress you as women and all the people of Afghanistan. We wish you all strength and courage to continue your struggle. We tell you, you are not alone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vivian. Beautiful words. And we would now like to hear from Mark Gillespie. Mark is a long-time LGBTI activist and was actually one of the original protesters at the first protest in Sydney that really became the beginnings of the Mardi Gras movement or march and parade that we have most years here annually in Sydney. And Mark is joining us from a bit further north in Queensland. So we'll hand over to you now, Mark. Thank you.
Sorry, Susan, I think we've lost Mark.
Oh, have we? Okay, well, we might, is anyone able to follow up with him to make sure he can rejoin us? If that's possible, that would be great. And I'll introduce our next speaker while we're doing that. Our final or our next speaker is going to be Paulina Pacheco. Paulina is a Chilean journalist who's based in Sydney. She's involved in feminist and Chilean solidarity activities. And certainly women across Latin America have been organising against violence against women for decades. Violence has been used as a weapon of war and occupation, as we know, but it is also the weapon of brutal dictatorships around the world. And women in Chile know firsthand about that, and they have been protesting for basic rights for women to live in safety, to have reproductive freedom, and against misogyny since the dictatorship and after it ended in Chile in 1990. So welcome, Paulina. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Susan, for having me here. I begin today by acknowledging the Eora Nation, traditional custodian of the land that I'm today, and I pay my respect to the elders, past and present. I come from Chile, a long and thin country in South America. Some people call us the Jaguar because of our economy, but the reality is that the Chilean women are still fighting for our sexual and reproductive rights to be part of the politics of the country, to make a space in different industries that normally are led by men, like sport journalism, constructions, and others. In Chile, we see women get killed at the hand of their husband and or boyfriends every week. We do not feel safe while we are walking on the streets. We need to continue raising our voice about our rights as women. We are an important part of every community across the world. We have the strength, braveness, and the joy to continue fighting, not just for us or for those little girls coming soon, but also for our sisters, cousins, nieces, aunts, even our mothers and grandmothers. We are here standing to face up every sort of violation in education, work, health, and public matters against women in Afghanistan. We are responsible to make these circumstances visible to everyone, because I truly believe that we all together can make huge difference to bring peace to Afghanistan. We also are here to say no more attempts against our sister women in Afghanistan, but also in the whole world. Libertad para las mujeres afganas.
Thank you, Paulina. Okay, now apparently Mark is trying to join us again via his telephone. So just, Mark, are you back with us again? Oh, it's such a shame. Doesn't look like he is able to rejoin. Well, what we might do is we do actually also have a friend here with us from the Tamil Refugee Council, Kalyani Impakumar. Kalyani, I'd just like to invite you, if you did want to say a few words, you'd be very welcome to. How would you feel about that? I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I'm sorry I hadn't prepared anything, but I've heard such inspiring stories from the Afghanistan women and the other women in this panel. And women rights are very close to my heart and very close to the Tamil women. Tamil women have gone through and are continuing to go through horrendous amounts of human rights abuses and general sexual violence from the Sri Lankan armed forces. Even today, we had a video that was released of women being, arrested for no reason, their phones being confiscated and taken. So this continues on. I'm really inspired and in awe of the Afghanistan women for their fight and their continuing fight for women's rights.
Thank you, Kalyani. We really appreciate your words, and thanks for doing that on such short notice. I think we've got Mark back now on the phone. Mark, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, thank you very much, Susan. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Sisters and brothers, I raise my voice today to support the brave Afghan women and other minorities who seek freedom from discrimination and from persecution. This period since the 15th of August has raised enormous fears for those of us living outside of Afghanistan, who can only begin to imagine what life will be like if you have to face violence and persecution. I speak as an Australian, as a gay man who was active in the 1970s for the rights of sexual minorities in my country. And today I want to speak just briefly, not just to Afghan women, but I want to speak to those gay men, lesbians, trans people, and other sexual minorities that live in Afghanistan who must be, at this moment, really wondering what the future will hold for them. All I can say to you now, and I want to direct my comments to these sexual minorities, please do not be fooled into believing that traditional values or religious traditional values can ever justify hatred, violence, or persecution. The Islam that I know is an Islam that will always provide mutual support, love, and protection, especially for those who are vulnerable. So I'm saying this clearly and strongly because through the period of the 1960s and 70s when I was young, it was this justification for violence and persecution that was based on these false claims, hiding behind religious edicts that led to suffering and led to the loss of so many lives. So I say this, and I say it with a desire that the foreign minister of the Taliban, Amir Khan Muttaqi, and the foreign minister of Australia, Marise Payne, will listen to these voices today, these brave women who I've heard earlier speaking. There's urgency in our voices because the future is uncertain. And these voices must be raised from around the world. Every country who was involved in the occupation of Afghanistan for 20 years must stand up now. We must hold the Taliban to account so that they defend human rights. Thank you for this opportunity today to speak to you. And I'm sorry that I could not be on the Zoom. I'm in Queensland in bachelor country and with difficult internet connections. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. We appreciate your efforts to get connected, and so glad you could at least speak to us via the phone. Well, that brings us to the end of our formal speaking list. And what we want to do now is we want to take a series of screenshots holding our signs that we can send to or we can share on social media. So I just ask if everybody could please pop your webcam on. Even if you don't have a sign, that's fine. As long as some of us do, we can all stand together or sit together in front of the camera and at least send a message of solidarity and hope to our brothers and sisters in Afghanistan. So if you can just hold your signs up. Oh, I think mine's backwards. Hang on, what's going on? How do I change that?
Trace over the back of it, Suze. No, seriously.
I think there's a way you can do it, isn't there?
Yeah, trace the back of it and turn it round.
There's something called like mirror.
Yeah, that's it.
Mirror something.
Oh.
Okay,
is it in the 3 ... more?
Yeah, that's it. You got it.
Suze.
All right. So
yeah, can you change the view of the screen, because we can see your face as the biggest. If you change the view, we can all see the small screens of everybody.
If you change your view setting from speaker to gallery, change it to gallery. You'll see
gallery, yeah. So then the photo will come in gallery. Yeah, perfect.
And pop your sign up nice and high next to your face.
How do I mirror it?
Just go to your video settings.
Yep.
Yours is good. It's good.
Yeah, but yours looks good, Rach.
Okay. Rach is good. It's good, Rach. Yeah.
If anyone else is having problems, speak up now.
And Duncan's taking a photo.
Yeah, I've taken about 12 so far. Yeah, I think I got it.
Yeah. Laurie, you need to turn it around as well, I believe. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Right, I think we're good.
Thanks.
Okay. Have you? All right. All right, everyone. Well, we're just on 4 o'clock. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Now, if you would like to stick around and have a bit more of an informal time for discussion, you're very welcome to. Our Kurdish sisters suggested that might be a nice way to finish up, so I'm happy to stay online. If anyone would like to chat informally, perhaps it's an opportunity for some of the groups to get to know each other a little better that have been represented here today. And